guys.
So first we're going to talk about classism in education. So one of the biggest issues with this is college costs and student loans. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
The average amount of student debt right now is
Really
rocket ship high. It's ridiculously high, and it's about to get worse because student loan rates are about to double, and Congress is very, very keen on keeping it that way.
Yeah, and if people can't afford an education, lots of times they can't afford to get a better job and to get out of the socioeconomic class that they're already in.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes in a circle.
We've basically made a higher education level than usual required and then made it impossible to get for poor people.
So you need money to make money, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
We can also talk about public schools, and the ones that shut down are always in low-income areas, especially areas high in racial minorities, but they're generally in low-income areas where the kids are more worried about making sure they have food on the table than grades, and that's seen as a poor reflection on the school, and they get shut down.
And that way, all these kids have to go to a different school, which then becomes overpopulated, and the kids don't get the attention that they need to learn properly.
And it makes it more expensive because the kids then have to get to a school that's further away.
Yeah. So you're kind of biting off your nose to spite your face.
Not fun. So the employment process really favors people who are already well off in some pretty messed up ways. So first, employers that enforce strict dress codes are usually enforcing dress codes that are expensive to maintain and are not really realistic for those that are in lower incomes.
Not to mention, by interviews, employers will lots of times look at how you're dressed, how expensive your clothes are, what your teeth look like, and for people who can't afford to get their teeth fixed or to buy really fancy brand name clothes, they might not get that job, even though they're more qualified than the other guy who can.
Yep. Employers in interviews may also look at an interviewee's credit scores, how long they've been unemployed, and all of these things that are really meant to make sure that those that aren't able to afford to be well off aren't really able to get jobs to make themselves better.
Sometimes they could even tell just by your social security number if you've ever gotten evicted from an apartment, and they will hold that against you. So there's been some bosses who said that they're not going to hire people from the lowest socioeconomic class because they think that they're lazy or that they don't have good work ethic, which is just wrong.
And with employers looking at how long a person has been unemployed, they're just perpetuating a cycle where people who are unemployed are seen as lazy, but then if you've been unemployed for a while, you're not able to find a job to get rid of this unemployed stigma.
Yeah, so it's just going around in circles and people are miserable.
Okay, so politics is the main venue for this classism thing. Republicans are always painting poor people as lazy, entitled. What other thing?
Mooching.
Welfare queens, especially if they are black.
Yes.
Single moms are awful, despite the fact that
There's nothing they can do about that, and it's not their fault, and lots of times they're working really, really hard.
and this affects the policies that get passed in a lot of ways. Like, politicians are always fighting to limit Social Security, to limit food stamps, to defund places that really help poor people. And this is all because poor people are basically seen as lazy, and that if they were to work a little bit harder, they could get rich, when in reality that's not true, just by simple math.
Yes, and as we said before, it's really hard to get a better job if you're that low down in the socioeconomic class-wise of things.
So a lot of the people that are fighting classism right now are doing it in a rather sucky way.
Yeah, they're being very exclusive about it.
There are two arguments that they really like to pull. One is that everybody ignores classism and it never gets any attention. This is completely false. People that are fighting other isms are always fighting classism. They're just not strictly fighting classism as its own thing. They're fighting classism as a part of their fight against racism, as a part of their fight against sexism. They are integrating classism into their own fights, and that's nothing wrong.
Because classism is lots of times parts of other things. It's not always exclusive. Most of the time it's not.
Anything that is classist is automatically, given the distribution of classes, racist and in most times sexist.
Yes.
So having classism as a part of an integrated fight against racism and sexism is just realistic.
Yeah. And classism is not necessarily always the root of all evil on its own. It is joined by other things.
Which is the argument too that they bring up, that classism is literally the only ism that still exists, and all the other ones are just in the past. And classism is the root of every issue. This is so far off the mark and is completely used to silence marginalized people, and there's really nothing we can say other than stop.
Yeah, cut it out. You're being nasty.
So, now that we've spent this video talking about how everything sucks, let's talk about the positive corner.
Yay!
So, internet access is getting a lot easier to access over time, and a lot of poor people are on the internet. Just realistically, you kind of need to be on the internet in order to be employed.
Sort of.
And so, as more poor people are getting on the internet, they're really being able to find their own voice and perform some really spectacular smackdowns on some really classist posts that always get tossed around.
Yeah, the internet gives everyone access to everything. So we can call out on things that are just wrong or pretty much demeaning to all people.
Yep, and there are some spectacular things that have been said, and as it's happening more and more, people are being able to see that this stereotype that people of lower classes are just lazy, they don't care, they're apathetic, clearly aren't true if they're performing these spectacular smackdowns.
So, this has been our video on classism. Thanks for watching. We've got resources on the bottom. Ding ding. Yes.
And join us next week when we talk about racism.